20 minutes past 1 o'clock on afternoons. And today on New Zealand Live, the man voted Best Acoustic Guitarist in the World more than once in Guitar Player magazine. Multiple Grammy nominee. By age 6, he was already a professional musician. He had toured through most of Australia by the time he had turned 10. Came to New Zealand for a solo tour of the North Island at only 14. And for 5 decades, he's entertained all over the world. But it's only in this decade that he's received the recognition he's due in places like America, I think. Although we've known him for much longer. He's supported and helped many New Zealand entertainers along the way. He is the guitar virtuoso, Tommy Emmanuel. Tommy, welcome home.
Jim, thank you. And kia ora to you and all your listeners.
We're claiming you as a New Zealand.
Really, oh, great. That's fine by me.
Well, you were born in the town of Muswellbrook?
Muswellbrook.
Muswellbrook it's pronounced, is it?
My father was working in the coal mine there for Tees Brothers, I think. And, the family had just moved when my mother was pregnant with me. And so my father... I don't know a lot about that period because it was so long ago, but I believe that the family kind of drifted around for a while with my father looking for a better job all the time, and I think there was lots of opportunities back in the 50s. His skills were mostly mechanical. He was a good mechanic. During the Second World War, he was a flight engineer, so he worked on planes and worked in planes as well. So.
I read once that you weren't rich, you were poor, but you were never hungry. Is that correct?
Well, thanks to my mother. Yeah, we never really had much at all, but we didn't know we were poor, did we? Because we were all having a lot of fun, and we were travelling around, and my mother had a way of just making everything just smooth, And when there was no money, when there was not much food, she'd get out the rice and the powdered milk and make something nice for us to eat, And in those days, all the rivers were full of fish and there were fruit growing everywhere, and we virtually lived off the land in those days, and people were very, very kind to us as well. There were 6 kids and mum and dad and a couple of helpers on the road,
Is that where you get your humility from? Because, you're a great performer. You see you, Tommy up on stage and, you're the guitar master and you're full of confidence. Mm. But in fact, there's a humility about you when you meet you.
Oh, well, I don't... I've never thought about any of that stuff, whatever people say about me, like when someone says, how does it feel being said you're the best, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I don't listen to that. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in trying to do the best I can. I'm like everybody else. Even those people who walk away with gold medals, at the Olympics, and you see them trying so hard. That's what I'm doing, the same thing. I'm just trying as hard as I can with using the gifts that I've been given, and I'm just going for it. I'm flooring it every night, to see where I can take it and what I can do and what I can learn and who I can steal from, That's what we do in music. We beg, steal and borrow from each other, And there's no time to be stopping and thinking about how great things are and how wonderful your abilities are. It's just you got to get to work, and that's all there is about it.
Let me ask you something else about that too, because I also read an interview with you when you said that some days you pick up a guitar and it's liquid honey in your hands, and some days you pick up a guitar and you feel like a klutz. And
that's
how interesting.
Well, that applies to a lot of people. Although, at the moment I have Frank Vignola and Vinnie Raniolo from New York on the road with me, and those guys seem so consistent, And my girlfriend Clara, who's sitting here with us today,
yes, she is,
she often asks me, how... is it a good hand day or is it a bad hand day? Like I'll say, I've got good hands today. In other words, I pick up the guitar and everything's flowing and my ideas are flowing. I've got it all together. And then there'll be other days where I've got all the attitude right, I've got all the preparation right, and I feel like I'm playing with 2 old laden down hands, you know, and you got to get yourself going to get
Isn't it
get
funny?
out there. It is funny.
And the great guitarists you've, excuse me, played with, Eric Clapton and Chet Atkins and all the rest, they'd presumably be the same. They have their clunker days too.
Oh, I'm sure. But, you know, the thing about people like that, Eric Clapton, or if you watch Eric, it doesn't matter what he's doing. He always pulls it off. He always does things that touch your heart, and you can always count on him doing that, you know, every single time. And that's why he's a champion. You know, he's a gold medalist. You know what I mean? In my eyes, he's got the heart of a true champion, and that he goes out there and does it as honestly and as thoroughly as he possibly can. And therein lies the formula for his success.
That's probably a description of Tommy Emmanuel too, but never mind. Tommy Emmanuel on New Zealand Live, 25 minutes past 1. So where is home at the moment? Where do you call home? Well,
Clara and I have a home in America in the city of Nashville, and I've lived there for 12 years on and off. And prior to that, I was living in Australia and living in England. I've lived in San Francisco for a while, lived in LA for a while. I've kind of got around, you know. And while I was trying to make a name for myself back in the 70s and 80s in Australia, I was playing in bands, I was producing artists, I was songwriting, but I was also going backwards and forwards between Australia and America, getting inspired by people who were much better than me and trying to figure out, you know, how could I get myself into the world, and how could I take my music around the world and reach out to people around the world, you know. And one time I went to this fortune teller in Thailand, and he was blind, so he first of all he couldn't have seen me to know what I looked like, and he couldn't possibly have known me to know what I do. And what he said to me was, what you do reaches out like fingers around the world. That's exactly the words he used.
Like fingers around the world.
That's what he said, yeah.
Okay, so you probably after he said that, you listened to what the rest of what he had to say.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so you're in Nashville, just because it's a guitar picking town, isn't it?
Well, it is, but it's you know, people think I moved to Nashville for the music scene. And that's really not the case. I moved there because it's the most affordable place on the planet right now, I think, for a person in the business.
Okay.
I actually originally wanted to live in Virginia because I really like being by the ocean, but it was just way, way too expensive, you know.
Oh, that's interesting. It would suit you, though, Nashville. A lot of
absolutely.
musicians,
well, you know, when Chet Atkins was alive, I used to hang out with him all the time. I'd make trips over there and stay in the granny flat at the side of his house, and that's where I lived. So I got to hang out with my hero, you know, right to the end of his life, and it was something that I could never dream would happen. You know, that's why. Being in life, you just never know what's going to happen. That's why you got to show up and do your best.
It's a great philosophy.
It works.
Tommy Emmanuel plays the Bruce Mason Centre tonight at 8 o'clock. Ticketmaster for tickets. Saturday, Founders Theatre in Hamilton, Ticketek, and Wellington Opera House on Sunday, Ticketek, 8 o'clock, all the shows. So it's a short tour.
Yeah, this one is, yeah. We're planning some return dates. I don't know exactly when yet, but it'd be nice to come back. I didn't get a chance to go to the South Island this trip.
Okay, next time. All right. And what sort of a set list are you doing? Is it all sorts? Are you mixing it up?
Yeah, I got a lot of new songs, and I'm trying a lot of different things. Also, as I said, I have Frank Vignola and Vinnie Raniola on the road with me, and Frank Vignola was the most incredible guitar player that I ever saw when I went to New York to play with Les Paul. Les was basically throwing all his solos to Frank. So Les was playing the melodies, and then Frank would take the solos. And it was like, you know, Django Reinhardt on steroids. It was unbelievable. And so I got to know Frank really well, and we just have a great chemistry, and the two of them play so well together. And New Zealanders have not seen anything like this.
No, it'll be an event. I know it will.
Absolutely.
You've got your main guitar with you today, is this correct?
Yeah, this... Made in Melbourne. There
Made
it
in
is.
Melbourne.
Yeah.
The Maton. And trust on your guitar, because I didn't know this, you've got the word trust.
The word trust, yeah. You got to trust that you're loved and you're needed, and that if you're doing the best you can for everybody else, that what you need to fulfill your destiny is going to come to you. That's what I believe.
Oh, wow. That's a great philosophy too.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's worked out for you?
You've got to step out in that faith, knowing that okay, I'm holding up my end of the bargain. I'm putting 100% of my energy into my gift for others.
Yeah.
And then all of what I need to fulfill that has got to come to me. And so it does.
It does. It works.
Including all the people you need, all the minute details, even right down to what kind of pick you need on the night. It's going to turn up.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
You're a good man to talk to, and of course a good man to listen to. And I could just listen to you. I'd talk to you all hour, but of course the audience is going to want to hear the great Tommy Emmanuel play. So what are you going to play for
Well,
us?
I just thought, for fun today, I might play a little bit of Australiana, seeing as I'm here in New Zealand. How about a little Waltzing Matilda and The Road to Gundagai?
I'd like to hear that.
You ready? There's it. And then something like that.
Something like that. It's a good hand day today, isn't it?
It's okay today.
It's an okay hand day today.
Yeah.
Without getting too technical for people who can't see your guitar at work, Chet Atkins, the whole business of Travis picking, I think it was called, was it, when he...
It came from Merle Travis.
Merle Travis, okay.
Yeah,
and
That's why it's called Travis picking, Jim.
And thank you.
Yep.
Makes sense. And
Yep.
you play the bass notes with your thumb.
Yeah, this is what Merle Travis sounded like. So you got there's the thumb, right, and then the fingers play the melody. So it's virtually like playing the piano. It's almost like honky tonk, isn't it?
Yeah, I understand
You know?
that.
And so Chet was very kind of neat. He'd go like that to spell out the chords, and Travis just dug the thumb in like that in a real kind of honky tonk way, and it was a really great sound. Well, this 9-pound hammer, it's a little too heavy for my size, for my size. Then he'd play. So you got everything going at once, you know. And so when I first started doing that, people would be looking around for the other players or the tape recorder behind the curtain. You know?
Yes.
And because people couldn't believe that you could do it all at once. And you have to think back what was going on in those days. Back in the 60s, everybody was listening to the Shadows, to the Ventures,
Yeah.
Duane Eddy, and Peter Poser, you know. And so nobody was making that sound. Everybody was a band. And so when Chet came along, and it sounds like there are more people than one, but it just says Chet Atkins on guitar, you'd think, oh, well, it's got to be a recording trick. But it isn't, you know. You can actually do it. And I worked it out when I was a kid.
It's funny because the texter, Steve of Dunedin, while you were playing before...
Hello, Steve.
Said, it's nice having Tommy Emmanuel in, but his backing guitarist is good too.
Boom. Thank you, Steve. Someone paid me a good compliment there.
And of course, you can play any style, as anyone who's watched your YouTube clips or seen you in concert knows. What other guitarists? Because a lot of guitarists learn from you. What other guitarists did you learn from most, or pick up just little bits and pieces from?
Well, everybody that I came across. At the moment, I'm trying to learn more Charlie Christian tunes from Frank and Vinny because they know a lot. And Charlie's, of course, from the 30s, you know. So I'm actually reaching back, but there are a lot of guys that I've listened to over the years, and I think some of my biggest influences, aside from Chet Atkins and Mel Travis, would have to be Jerry Reed, James Burton, and Albert Lee. They were my biggest influences, and Don Rich with Buck Owens and Roy Nichols with Merle Haggard. They were kind of country players. So those guys were the big influence, and then along came Wes Montgomery, Joe Pass, and jazz guys like that. And then George Benson was my favorite jazz player for most of my life.
Oh, he was he?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so, and I liked Les Paul, of course, very much. But I think if I had to pick one guitar player that I thought was the greatest of all time, people think it's Jimi Hendrix, and it's not. It's Django Reinhardt by a long way. So, but I love Jimmy as well. But I didn't get into Jimmy until I was about 30 years old, you know. Yeah. When I was young, I didn't get a lot of that stuff. Like most teenagers were into Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, all that stuff, and the Stones, and to my ear, it all sounded out of tune. You know, of course, I like it now, but when I was young, I just didn't get it. You know.
Okay, it's interesting. So it took you time to appreciate all that.
All that, yeah.
All right. Why is Django? Sorry, my voice is still recovering.
Yeah.
Why is Django the great one?
Because, well, you've only got to listen to what he played and then know of where he came from and the fact that he was so badly burned when he was young, and taught himself to play all over again with two fingers that work properly, and then the other two that just kind of sat there like dead meat almost. And he created a style of music that is popular all over the world, that sets people on fire. Yeah. And if you stop and examine his playing, it's all amazing. Not just a bit of it, but all of it, you know.
Chet Atkins, though, was the great mentor of your life, wasn't he? And
yeah.
And he presented you with a very special award about 10 years ago, back in the late 90s.
Yeah, 99. It was
99.
The Certified Guitar Player Award.
Yeah.
And or the CGP. Chet used to call it corny guitar player, but
And you've got that on your guitar.
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when he gave me that award, the award it's like a marble kind of thing, and with gold writing on it. It's very beautiful, and it says for lifetime contribution to the art of fingerpicking. That's what it says. So when he gave me that award, it was a big obligation, as I found out.
Is that the best award you've got? I mean, you've got the Order of Australia, you've got all sorts of awards, and is that the one that means most to you, though? The one from Chet?
I wouldn't say it means more than anything else. I don't really think about awards too much, to be honest, Jim. But it is a great honour. But at the same time, awards and gold records and all those things, they do not put food on the table. Hard work does.
Yeah.
And but the certified guitar player thing it's Chet's way of saying, please continue to take your music around the world, to take this style and see if other people are inspired to do it too. And that's exactly what's happening. Everywhere I go, you can go as far as Beijing or you name it, and there are people coming backstage wanting to play Chet Atkins and Merle Travis tunes for me, Kids set on fire by this music. And that's much better than kids running around with guns and knives in their hands, I can tell you.
And people love it, don't they?
They do.
They meet you sometimes, and I think you were talking about a little Korean boy who was crying when he met you because of all the emotion.
Oh, my goodness. My first time in Korea and my first time in Japan, I'll never forget, because the people, they only knew me from YouTube. So when I came to meet the fans after the show, I mean, people were literally standing there vibrating. They were trembling, with emotion.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful thing. And it means, you realize how much it means to them, and so you've got to treat people in a very gentle and genuine way,
You do an enormous amount of good for people.
Well, I try, I think.
There's one terrible thing you do, and a texter has referred to it. Mm-hmm. Listening to great players like Tommy Emmanuel makes you want to give up.
Oh, that's not true. You're supposed to be inspired, Mr. Listener.
You were pretty good. I mean, you were pretty good at age 6. They had to drag you back into school. All you ever wanted to do was this, yes?
That's right. Yeah, I never wanted to do anything else. The only other thing that I loved was mowing lawns, and I had a lawn mowing business my first year, my last year of primary school and first two years of high school. I had a lawn mowing business as well. And that's how I got to New Zealand. I came here when I was 15 on a Guthrie's tour, an 8-day bus tour.
Gosh.
Yep, from Auckland down to Wellington, stopping over in Rotorua along the way, back in the late 60s. And I saved the money up. I earned it through my lawn mowing business, and I bought the tour and came here. And little did I know was that I was actually doing everything illegally, apparently, because when I got back into Sydney, and I picked up my bag and I was looking for the person holding the sign, with my name on it. No one was there, and the Qantas ground staff lady said, "Who are you with?" And I said, "I'm just on my own." And she said, "How old are you?" I said, 15. She said, "Where have you been?" I said, "I've been to New Zealand." She went, "Don't tell anyone." Because in those days it was illegal for anyone to travel under the age of 16.
And you didn't know that?
I didn't know that. No one told me. So I came here, did the tour, had a great time, and went back to Australia. And then, anyway, that's what happened.
It's very funny. Tommy Emmanuel is with us on New Zealand Live. All sorts of requests coming in from your fans, but I won't besiege you with those because you'll know what you want to play.
Let's hear them.
Blues.
Come on.
Can you play some blues, Tommy?
Can I ever? You ready?
Yeah. That'll do. Okay, odds and sods questions then.
All right.
Your opinion of Andre Segovia, asks Phil Marks. In terms of the great guitarist.
Segovia was one of the most important people in the history of the guitar. Nobody contributed more than him to the classical music, and made the guitar popular all around the world. And I loved his tone. What a tone he had.
I suppose it depends, because some guitarists absolutely specialise, don't
Yeah.
they? For example, in flamenco.
Yeah.
And I suppose it depends on what you prefer in terms of what you want to listen to.
Well, Segovia created a style of playing the instrument that is perfect. It's called the rest technique. And when a lot of people learn to play classical guitar with this technique, and this technique that Segovia made famous is the most perfect technique I've ever seen. It's the perfect way to play the guitar. You hold the guitar up like that, on an angle with the headstock pointing straight up.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that, because the way you hold your hand, your left hand, is completely, economical and the right way. The way I play the guitar is like a country blues kind of way. So I hold the guitar down and use my thumb over the top, so I break all the rules. But it suits the way I play. If I was to play classical, I'd have to relearn everything. But Segovia's method, to my eyes, is perfect.
And everybody plays the guitar the way you do now in terms of the angle of the
I
guitar.
don't think everybody does it their own way.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, virtually, more horizontal than vertical.
Yeah.
But when you see the Beatles, for example, play in their very early concerts, their guitars are pointing up, aren't they? Far more than later on.
George and John wore their guitars quite high. In fact, we all did. Most of us didn't play our guitar down on our hip like everybody does now.
Yeah.
That came later. I think it was Jimmy Page who really made that popular. Get the Gibson Les Paul and stick it on your hip like a gunslinger.
Yeah.
Up until then, we all stood up straight and held our guitars on our chest.
Yeah.
And that's what George did too, George Harrison. So, it's just a sign of the times of where things, how things developed. Yeah.
You mentioned YouTube. When you go to YouTube and hear you play, for example, Guitar Boogie, it's a revelation. Was that the first guitar? I read it was the first guitar piece you ever learned, Guitar Boogie.
It was, my brother and I learned it together. And I learned the rhythm part, and he learned all the melody, right? And then years later, I decided to work out my own version. So when I played it with my brother, I was playing this part like that, and he's going, right? And then years later, when I played it on my own, I decided to put both parts together at the same time. So I went... Right? And the versions on YouTube are just me playing it on stage in front of people and, just really going for it.
Yeah.
And it's all improvised.
Yeah. Is that a risk every time you go on stage? I mean, some of those days you go on stage and, you'd be better than others, obviously, even though the audience probably can't tell. Is that a risk doing improv to that extent, the way you do it?
Well, it is, but at the same time, you want to see where you can go and what ideas can suddenly come to you. It's all about the spontaneity, the pushing yourself out on the limb, because you want to see where you can take it. And sometimes the magic really happens, and like the planets line up, and you get idea after idea after idea, and it's like, wow, this has got a flow, this is really going, this is what I live for, And then the next night you go out with exactly the same preparation, same attitude, and you let it fly, and nothing comes to you. And you just got to get through it and try to invent ideas as you're going.
You do remarkable things with the guitar. I mean, you can take a piece like Mason Williams's Classical Gas, which is
completely turn it upside down.
Well, in its original form, it's a fairly cool and stately guitar workout, and you just make it shimmer with emotion from the get-go, don't you?
Well, I look at it like this, Jim. I worked on the original version a bit, and I found it, as a solo piece, it just didn't work for me because it didn't get going soon enough. You see, people have the attention span of a 2-year-old in general. And so what I decided to do was to play it in a different way and change it all around. And there's a difference. If I was going to play it with an orchestra and a band, I could happily go back and play it as it was written because it's perfectly written. But when you play it as a solo piece, you got to get smoking on the thing, you know. So when I started playing it in pubs and places like that, where you got to remember, I came from a training ground as a solo player. I was one of the only people on the planet playing big pubs and clubs where they had rock bands, mostly rock and roll bands. So I'm playing acoustic guitar to 500 bikies who are throwing bottles at the stage, and I'm playing everything as fast, as loud, as hard as I can for 2 hours, so I don't get killed, and I get paid at the end and get out of there in one piece. That was my training ground as a player. So it was like boot camp every night, you know.
It's a great training ground in some ways, though, isn't it?
Well, it makes you realize your arrangements have to stand up, and they have to stand up now.
Yeah.
You know, your life depends on them. That's where I came from.
Tommy Emmanuel is on New Zealand Live. It's 9 minutes to 2. Anything else you would like to play, Maestro?
Oh, well, I could play a little bit of classical gas if you like.
Oh, yes.
Here's something I stole from Chet.
That is dazzling.
I was sight reading all that, folks.
Tommy and his 5 backup guitarists.
Yeah, keep it down, you guys.
Plays the Bruce Mason Centre tonight at 8 o'clock in Auckland.
Thanks.
Saturday, Founders Theatre and Wellington's Opera House on Sunday. And then what? You're back over doing what?
I'm going back to Melbourne to do a charity event for a charity I support there called Kids Undercover.
Yes.
Raising money for homeless people, for children in need, and for families in crisis, of which there are plenty around the world, but there are a lot in Australia. And then I go to Germany for a guitar festival, then I go to see my daughters, and then I'll be home, and my first show is in St. Louis on the 6th of September.
So you like to be busy?
I do.
The charity, I'm glad you gave me that opening because you support a lot of charity. You support UNICEF, you support the Haiti, the terrible need in Haiti.
We did some auctions.
You did. You auctioned guitars for that, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. We raised over $40,000 the first time, and wow, it was an amazing response, and people are amazingly generous.
Yeah, you walk the talk, which is lovely, and you also see. I suppose you're aware of the need in the world, but you also see the best of people, don't you? You see them. You reach out to them and they reach out to you. It must be a lovely feeling.
Well, it is, absolutely. I mean, look, when I hear that lady Amanda that you were talking with when were at the beginning of this hour,
yeah,
what an inspiring person she is. She has a son who has the disease. She's a real person getting through and contributing, even in spite of that. So she's a greater hero than I'll ever be. That's for sure. And, I'm born to play music. I wish I could contribute more, in a real way that a lot of people do, like if I was the kind of person who could be involved in a real way in something like UNICEF or that, I would love to be able to do that. But I'm born to play, and I have to admit it, and I have to use whatever I can to help others. And there's not much else I can do about it except, give it the best I can.
No, you're doing what you're supposed to do.
I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely you are. Tommy Emmanuel. Now, this is the other big question, really. Who has most excited you? Because, we could spend half an hour talking about all the sessions work you've done, the bands you've played with, the big names you've fraternised with over the years, big names. And what has been the most exciting of those moments for you?
Well, I think excitement-wise, for me, doing the closing ceremony of the Olympic Games in 2000 was one of my most exciting moments of my life. But I think probably working on the Michael Jackson track was the most pressure I've ever felt in the studio. And it was only because of my deep respect for Michael. And when I got the call to play on the track, when I heard the track, I thought, okay, I'll do this, I'll do that. And I worked on it. And it's very simple, and it's something I could have done in half an hour. I spent 8 hours on it, and I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders purely because I wanted to know that I did the absolute best I possibly could for him,
Do you remember your work on that? Can you?
Yeah, it was like this. Let me see. And would you like to go with me? And she answered, yo, to me. And I guess I learned my lesson much too soon. It was like that, and I played a little solo. That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Thank you. Well, I was quoting the melody and everything, and what I did that day was what I normally do for any producer. I give him, 4 or 5 different options to choose from. So I did a version where I played what I would consider a little too much, so he can choose what he wants from all that. Then I gave him a version where I just played what I thought was exactly the right thing.
Yeah.
And then I gave him a version which was completely different again, and blah, 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 like that, so he could choose. And he did pretty much what I expected him to do. He chose the best little bit out of the one that I thought was right, and that's it.
Okay, so your instincts were correct.
Yeah.
And did you hear back from Michael Jackson about that?
Well, he was gone.
Right.
It was after he's gone.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear from him, but it's going to be a little difficult.
Yeah, the longer it goes on.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of going on, you've got 19, 20 albums to your credit now.
Have I? Probably.
I think so. But the great joy, obviously, isn't so much. Well, the recording is a fine legacy.
I
but it's
love
the concerts.
recording. Yeah, concerts and people often say to me, what do you prefer, studio or?
Yeah, people always say that.
Yeah. Well, I like both. Both arenas are close to me. There's nothing like playing in front of an audience. That's the greatest feeling in the world. But there's also, for me personally, there's no better feeling than putting headphones on, sitting in front of a good microphone and playing, where all you hear is the tones and the sounds of your own music, and hearing it in a way that you only hear when you're in that environment, and it's a beautiful thing. And I love both, I love when I got a good sound going in the studio. I like to start creating, and I like to be spontaneous in the studio and really go for stuff the same as I do on stage. So I like both, And also where a show can go. Like, for instance, in Germany a couple of years ago, I was meeting folks before the show, and there was a little boy there. His name was Jonas. And him and his mum and dad were sitting, waiting to meet me and get an autograph.
Yeah.
And his father said, oh, he can play a little bit of Tears in Heaven. And I said, how good. Okay, Jonas, play it. So he starts playing like that. And I joined in and started singing, If I Saw You in Heaven. Right? And
look, I'm sorry to cut you short.
yeah.
I'll get the rest of that story from you.
Oh, we got news.
I know, you can hear the pips. Tommy Emmanuel, New Zealand Live.